Welcome to the 36th Annual Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival presented by Visual Communications. My name is Dorothy Shao, and I'm a shorts programmer for the festival.
My name is Matt Fernandez, and I'm the box office manager for the festival, as well as a podcaster, journalist, and an actor.
We are zooming in from Los Angeles, and we'd like to take the time to acknowledge the indigenous stewards of our land before we came to live here, specifically the Tongva and Chumash peoples. Thank you for joining us for an artist conversation for the shorts program Juke in the Box, featuring a medley of dark films from a darker realm about murder, sex, drugs, and ghosts.
Before we begin our artist conversation, we'd like to thank everyone for making this festival possible, especially the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal, California Arts Council, SAG-AFTRA Producers Industry Advancement and Cooperative Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and HBO and Warner Media. And special thanks to our community partner organizations for their valuable work and for continuing to support visual communications. Special shout out to the folks behind Haunted Little Tokyo, spectacular nights to enjoy Little Tokyo at home.
All right, and let's start our artist conversation. So we're gonna intro the artist right now. So how about you, G? You wanna go first?
Hi everyone, my name is G. I'm the writer and director for Gold, and I just relocated from Brooklyn, New York to Los Angeles, California.
Welcome. How about you, Jeff?
Hello, I'm Jeff Fong. My film's Biter and the Three Blind Rats, and I am in Sacramento, California.
Welcome. How about you, Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Trenton. I'm the writer and director of Out Chinatown. I am based in Oakland, California.
How about you, Leah?
Hi, how are you? My name is Leah Borromeo, and I am coming in from London. I am the director and producer of The Mortician of Manila.
Welcome. And you, Nathan?
How's it going? My name is Nathan Murthy, and I wrote and directed Finals. I'm based in Northern California in Chochenyo Ohlone Land, also in Oakland, California.
Welcome. And you, Tab?
Hi, my name is Tab Murphy. I am the screenwriter of The Haunted Swordsman, and I am based in LA.
Welcome. All right, let's get started, Matt.
All right, so starting with you, Jeff, for your film, Bite You in the Three Blind Rats, I personally love that the film is in first-person view, and it tends to be with films that take that perspective. It's kind of risky. Films in the past that have done that, like Cloverfield or Hardcore Henry, have tended to make viewers feel kind of nauseous and kind of restricted in what they're seeing. What went into your decision to make your film first person, and what kind of advantages and disadvantages did that provide you?
Cool question. The reason I chose to do first person was because I wanted to challenge myself with something really short. And I just knew the original concept was like a gang in the garage, and then there's like some interrogation going on. That's all I initially had. And then once I started writing it more and more, I felt like to kind of live in one location successfully, I needed a little extra of maybe a gimmick or something that can make it a little bit more fun while in there. So that's kind of why I chose first person to be one of the members being interrogated. I also liked the idea of like churning and then seeing perspective from ourselves, our own camera. So I thought that would be really fun. And then I had all these other ideas that we tried to do. We tried to do something where like the camera tries to spit out blood. Boy, that was hard. And we ended up like just not doing it. We tried it so many times and we're like, no. But like there's a lot of really cool things happening and seeing people's perspectives looking at you. So yeah, that was most of the fun. Plus then it made it so that one of the leads, Osric, he didn't have to dress up. He just came in his pajamas and just sat behind me. So yeah.
What was hard about shooting it in first person?
I mean, I was the camera operator, and the whole point of this was like I finally bought my own Red camera when I made this. So this was the first film I made on that camera. So I was like my whole life trying to save up to finally have my own camera like that. And so then I was like, I need to film something. So here I am. Usually, I have my own production company, but we use like C100s and we use Sonys. And so we use slightly lighter cameras. And so for that, I'm just like sitting in a chair holding this rig, and like my arm was like giving way every like 10 minutes because it was so heavy. So because I kind of needed to have a little bit of a shake to make, like, I was testing out how to be like a head of a person as a camera without, without being like, so that was actually really hard, was keeping that consistency as doing all the movement. I was like literally being an actor because I had to react to the actors, and what they were doing. So like if a character would like make a head movement, I would have to do that. And a lot of that I was learning on the day of, which was really cool. Like for me, that was so much fun. The whole point was to make it a challenge, and that definitely was. But it was awesome, and ended up being like a really big collaboration. It was just all these people in the garage, just like trying to figure out how to make those quick little movements feel right. So yeah, that it was a difficult challenge that turned out to be really rewarding, I thought.
I definitely have a lot more respect for how you were able to make that work now.
Oh, thanks. It's fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to you, Nathan, and your film Finals. So Finals touches on a lot of the struggle that a lot of today's youth have, trying to graduate with little debt as possible to no debt at all. I know I've had friends that have had trouble trying to get through that. What is your experience with trying to complete that and go through what today's educational system provides or doesn't provide for youth?
Yeah. So I thought I was smart until I got to college. And I realized just how behind I was compared to a lot of people who were prepared. Plus, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Houston, Texas, lived there all my life, moved to California in 2006 to go to Cal, where we shot the film. And, the first year is just like getting accustomed, getting adjusted to everything. But one of the challenges, though, is just one, being an out-of-state student. I didn't know too many people who were like based in California. So there was that sense of just getting to know people as a stranger, because, there were people who were like going to the same high school. They knew each other from debate team or from doing track together in different school districts. So me, on the other hand, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just this dude from Texas, right? And on top of that, what was really interesting was that, in my film, there's a very subtle but hinted conversation on sort of this conversation on colorism in like the Asian community. And one thing that was interesting for me, like as a Cal student when I was there, was that even though, so I'm half Indian, half Filipino, so I'm Asian, quote unquote. And, I wasn't perceived as that. And, Filipino people didn't know I was Filipino, Indian people didn't know I was Indian. And so there's like this awkward sense of trying to get in where you fit in, but then having to explain who you are, and then kind of feeling and trying to validate yourself in front of other people who self-identify as such. And so that film is really a conversation about my experiences in college and some of the experiences of my friends in college, who all kind of sense this feeling of alienation, of isolation, and not necessarily being prepared to excel in that environment.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing, Nathan. We're gonna move on to you, G, the filmmaker of Gold. So based on your artist statement, you mentioned that it was about grief. Can you elaborate on that and why you chose Russian roulette as the game that these kids play? It is quite an experimental piece, if any of you haven't seen it.
Gold is an experimental film about grief. It was adapted from a poem I wrote for my thesis in creative writing back in college. I wanted to make a film about grief because my father passed away when I was young, and so I wanted to tackle such a big subject in 5 minutes, and I think poems can do that. So to turn a poem into a film was something I wanted to do for myself as a filmmaker, prove I should be doing this. And the way I wanted to do that was every person in the film, their line works as a stanza in a poem, sort of. They all kind of represent the same character. And there's 6 people, and I think I try to make it steps of grief and how we digest information or try to cope with loss or cope with who we want to be. The first line is, the difference between gold and God is a small line between OD. I think the first step to grief is going crazy and trying to find yourself and living in excess.
Wow, why Russian roulette of all things?
I think when you live a life of excess, you start to gamify life, and as in like there's winners, there's losers, there's alphas, there's betas, there's a way to win or succeed. And the thing about games is that luck is the biggest thing. And with Russian roulette, usually there's one bullet in the chamber, but I think how we're living in a society right now, where the odds are so stacked against everyone, there's 5 bullets in the chamber. And if we all know we're going to die and are living, what are we living towards? And I think Russian roulette was a good metaphor for that.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I was just like shocked at the end of that. But after understanding what you shared with us, it's definitely so poetic, and it fits the poem that you just mentioned.
Yeah, only the first line is adapted, so that kind of set me off on writing it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing, G. And how about you, Mark? You directed Lights Out Chinatown. Can you please share with us the use of Chinatown as a location in this film, why you decided to do that? I feel like all Chinatowns have like a history of a lot of bittersweet memories and just so many stories. So why did you choose this one in particular?
I think in general, in writing Lights Out Chinatown, we weren't trying to be specific to San Francisco's Chinatown in general, but like Chinatown as a whole, as an immigrant community, and where people come to pursue a new life or a community in a brand new place. And so the short film Lights Out Chinatown was, on the surface, it's really a crime story that follows like a struggling refugee that's trying to eke out a living in America. And having escaped the Vietnam War, he came to Chinatown in pursuit of the American dream. But quickly finds that making a living is harder for a second-class citizen just like himself. And beneath the surface, it's more of a love story between two people that shared a connection through their alienation. And so Chinatown as a setting is, more about like the disillusionment of them together trying to figure out this crime, coming to America and like finding that they're this heinous murder, this heinous act is probably going to go unsolved because it's the death of an illicit masseuse from an illicit massage parlor. Like detectives aren't really paying attention. You can tell pretty quickly that based on like the lack of like media coverage or anything like that, it's just going to go unsolved. So it's really about them coming to terms with like where they stand in the caste order.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. What was the purpose behind having Folk be a forensic artist of all things?
He actually came here. He's from Vietnam, the character. He's a talented architect, but just simply cannot find work. And so he has to make a living somehow. And he lives in this tiny little studio apartment, just trying to eke out a living. And like, that's all he can do. And like the extra bit is that he's not even first to be called in the Rolodex from his connection to the detective. So he just happens to be called this time because it was a witness that saw the crime is also Vietnamese. So this is happenstance that he got this gig because he is Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for sharing. And moving on to Tab, who wrote The Haunted Swordsman.
The Haunted Swordsman.
Yes, this is probably the first and only horror film I've seen using primarily puppets as the characters, and it was quite a lot of fun because I was so amazed at the production value, and some of the puppets were pretty scary. You gotta tell us why
cool.
puppets. Yeah, why puppets?
Well, I mean, first of all, I feel like a little bit of the odd man out here on this panel because number one, I'm not Asian, and number two, I'm probably 3 times as old as any of the other filmmakers on this. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody. I mean, I love hearing your stories about your movies. I think it's awesome, and I remember when I was starting out, and so it's already been a lot of fun for me to be here. I think, I've been a screenwriter for almost 40 years now. And, I've, I had a pretty good career in Hollywood. I've written a lot of cool stuff and gotten movies made and all that. I've never written a short. It never occurred to me that I would do that. So a couple of years ago, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, listen, I've been invited to a short film that a friend of mine directed, and it was made with puppets." And I was like, "Puppets? Oh man," because I was thinking, like I had no idea, right? So I said, "Okay, I'll come with you." And so the film was A Mill at Calder's End, which was a ghost story puppet short that Kevin McTurk, who directed Haunted Swordsman, had made. He'd crowdfunded it, and so it was. He was showing it down on the Jim Henson lot here in LA. So I sat there, not knowing what to expect, and let the lights go down, and this movie comes on. I mean, this with puppet characters, and literally a minute into it, I was like, holy, you know what? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I said, I got to meet this guy. I got to meet this guy who did this, because it was just the storytelling was great, and the artistry and the puppets, and there was this moment, like when it started, where you go, okay, intellectually, I know these are puppets, but it was so well done that you just make this leap of faith, and you forget after a minute that you're watching puppets, and you're just so involved in the story and the characters. And I wanted to know how somebody could do that. How could you make us care about a piece of, wood and paper mache? I just, I thought that was so cool. So I went up after that and I introduced myself, and I said to Kevin, I said, if you ever do anything again, I mean, I want to write it, man. I mean, because this is just the coolest thing I've seen. And I've seen a lot because I've been in Hollywood for 40 years, and it's hard to see something new that you haven't seen before. But so he's like, okay, cool. And so like a month later, he called me up and he said, Tab, were you serious about wanting to write? I said, yes, I was serious. So we have lunch, and it turns out we both have this affinity for samurai movies, and just love them, love the genre. And he said, well, I have this character, I like this samurai character I want to make a film around, but I don't really have a story. I have ideas. So that's, Kevin and I worked together. I sort of like outlined the story, created the story, and when he was happy with it, he crowdfunded. I think he was hoping to raise like $80,000 to make this, and he raised 140, which was awesome. I mean, that just, he's so well beloved in the special effects industry here in Hollywood, but this is his true passion. So that's what we did. We raised the money, and then we went off and we made this short. And for me, it was just so cool to be on set. It was so cool to be around artists. It was so cool to be around the puppeteers making these puppets come to life, and see the whole behind the scenes thing. And it was just something I'd never experienced in all of my career. So it was just the coolest thing.
Wow,
I know
that's
that's a
awesome.
long-winded answer, but I'm still excited about it. I love the medium. It's just so cool to be a part of it. So I was
Yes.
happy to stand in for Kevin today. So
Yeah, it's very different. So thank you so much for sharing.
yeah.
Thank you. A question for you, Leah. Your film is The Mortician of Manila. And for you, Leah, your journalism background has definitely made The Mortician of Manila not just an investigative piece on Duterte, but also on Orly's life as well, and the whole situation surrounding the drug war and his position within it. How did you find him?
I mean, this was it's a lot easier than I thought it would take. I have a friend in Manila, a photojournalist called Ezra Akayan, and a few other sort of photojournalist friends as well. And the name that kept popping up was Orly Fernandez. And I just thought, okay. I had an idea in my head about what I wanted. I wanted an undertaker, and I set out to find one. And essentially, I had a few articles and a few little bits and bobs here and there that I kind of, worked off of. But I just thought the easiest people to start with would be the people who'd be covering the story day by day. And those were my photojournalist friends. And so Ezra and a few others just said, well, there's this guy. And Ezra sent me this photograph of Orly lit by the sort of sign of the Eusebio funeral home or parlor. 24 hours, open 24 hours is what it says at the over his head. And he had the sort of hat and he had the sort of smokes on, and I was just like, this guy's perfect. I got to get to know him. And turns out I was already going to be in Manila, dealing with family, shall we say, for Christmas, or dealing with the Filipino flavor of Christmas, which is, it's already kind of weird anyway. So I was going to be there, so I might as well head on over to a part of the town that I don't really have much business in, and hung out with Orly for a while and tried to convince him to uh, be the star kind of protagonist in the film. And yeah, I mean, I was really surprised about how open he was to this. He was actually quite, for somebody who has diametrically opposing political views to my own, we got on pretty well. And, we have been able to sort of joke and bond over dark jokes and dogs. And we just, he said yes, absolutely. And, he opened himself up to letting us film absolutely everything. There was nothing I don't think that we really missed from spending all that time there.
So it didn't really take you much convincing for him at all.
Not really. I mean, I was more freaked out about the asking him than he was about saying yes. I'd already lined up a whole series of things I would ask him, and I'd propose in various strategies, and I was very surprised for him to say yes pretty much straight away. I think it's he's it's not his first rodeo when it comes to cameras coming around, because his is the sort of focus point for quite a lot of the killings. So his kind of Grand Central Station for a lot of the bodies. There's a bunch of photographers and a bunch of people who, at the very start of the killings, who spent quite a lot of time there. And the bodies were kind of, quite literally overflowing into other rooms and other parts of the morgue because there were so many. So he is familiar with and accustomed to having media and cameras and press and chaos and police and investigations, and he knows how to spin plates and juggle balls. So asking him to come and say, can I follow you around with a camera for a while? And yes, I'll get your mundane stuff. I'll get your daughter coming home from school. I will get you waking up in the morning. I'll get you washing your dog. He was a little bit perplexed as to why I would do that, and why I was, rigging him with a microphone every time I turned up in the morning. But eventually he got used to that. And, he was totally natural throughout the film. And that was actually what kind of got me, is that as we were filming, the stronger our bond kind of became, and the more of a friend he became. And I didn't expect that to happen.
Well, thank you so much for that response, Leah. Definitely gives me a lot of more perspective on what his like and what his life and chaos is like surrounding all of this.
You're welcome, Matt.
I'll start with the next round of questions. So, Jeff, for Baichi and the Three Blind Rats, can you share with us the meaning behind the title? Because I know Baichi is a Chinese term for idiot, but like Three Blind Rats, just go a little bit more into detail about what that means.
Yeah, well, so like what you just said, it's pronounced differently with different dialects too, which one of the actors was talking to me about ahead of time, because I was pronouncing it one way, they were pronouncing it another, and that ended up becoming a joke within the film itself to, in a way, teach people how to say the word. But I literally was trying to come up with a name that, because it's a nickname for one of the main characters, right? And it's like a insulting nickname, but still is something that he just kind of identifies by. So I wanted to write something that felt like a name, but to people that don't speak Chinese and don't know what it means, they kind of learn something as we go along. So that was part of the origin of that. And the Three Blind Rats kind of just sounds nice, I mean, there are three blinded characters that are being interrogated, and we don't know which one or who did what necessarily, and we're trying to figure that out with the other gang members. And so for me, it's a fun way to kind of get to title something to make people interested into what's happening. Because with something like this, it's only 6 minutes and it's all taking place in one location. You got to be like snappy fast. You got to really get people's attention and draw them in. And so for me, I wanted like a title that was catchy, something that would make people intrigued. And then also they can kind of like learn as they go about what the title means throughout the film. So,
yeah. I mean, Baicha caught my eye just because, you know, I'm Chinese too. So I was just like, oh, who's the idiot here? And why are there 3 blind rats? So that was intriguing. So I think you succeeded.
I don't speak Chinese. So it's honestly like I had to like pronounce it so many different ways. And on set, people were pronouncing it because apparently there's 2 different ways to say it, depending on the dialect. Mm-hmm. And so like I'm always like so self-conscious, you know, when I'm saying it. I like practice it all the time, but still it's like, you know, you don't want to pronounce it wrong. So but at the same time, like Gio, one of the characters, he literally keeps correcting Inte, who's the main character.
I love Inte.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Inte was awesome, but like, you know, he keeps correcting that idiot right over and over and over, the character. And so that's part of the fun, and it usually gets like the biggest laughs out of it too. So I mean, like my thing, I'm like, I tend to write a lot of genre specific comedies, and it's kind of a hard thing to write in my opinion, because for festivals it's hard to program my type of stuff from what other festival directors tell me to, and other people. And so I like that it's at least getting into some festivals and people are seeing it and having fun with it, and seeing this type of comedy with this type of darkness, and seeing like a bunch of like really epic looking like and very funny Asian men that typically get typecast into like being gangsters. So that's kind of why I did this, is to show a typecast, but show that they can also be funny too. You don't always have to put them in as a gangster and that's all. They're just supposed to be assholes the whole time. They can, you know, all of these guys are super funny and really talented.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. So y'all should watch it if you haven't. Thanks for sharing,
Thanks.
Jeff. And Nathan, back to you. So I actually wanted to ask about the Bay Area vibes in your film.
Yeah.
Totally got such Bay Area. I'm not from the Bay Area. I'm an LA native, but I was just like, well, this is a Bay Area film for sure. Just location, music, casting, everything. So please share with us your experience about how that's affected your influenced your filmmaking. And did you grow up there? Oh no, you said you grew up in Texas. So
yeah, so I grew up in Texas, and well, it's funny though, because up until this point, I've lived almost half my life in the Bay Area. And what's funny though is that like some people, for as long as I've lived here, people now think I'm actually like from the Bay Area, like a Bay Area native. And I guess that's just because I've become so like acclimated to it. But you know, the thing is like, so this film was largely inspired. So in the film, TJ, the main character, plays this student who, you know, he's really talented. He's precocious, young Black male, and he, you know, hasn't been able to harness the focus that he needs to hone in his talent into, you know, getting just his schoolwork done. And so when I was like thinking about the story, it reminded me a lot of a big influence for the story was Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon. And I remember as a kid when I watched Good Will Hunting, how cool it was that they chose like Boston and MIT as like the mise en scene for that story. And it got me wondering, you know, like, you know, the UC Berkeley campus in the Bay Area in general is just like way more beautiful than Boston or MIT. And I was like, how come there's never been a story like this about students going to school here? And, you know, that's where it started. That was kind of like the seed that was planted, and it kind of just branched out into this larger vignette of images of the Bay Area. The film I did before that, what we shot in Oakland, also using the same character, Justin Williams, who plays TJ. And something that I've been really setting myself out to do as a filmmaker, as someone who lives here, is really capturing the energy that I find living in the Bay Area. And, you know, everyone talks about how like the Bay Area has different microclimates. Like you go to San Francisco, it's going to be really cold. You go to the East Bay, it's going to be a little warmer. You know, like every zip code, every like block in the Bay Area has like a different vibe. And, you know, everything from like the post office scenes where he's picking up his packages to the neighborhoods that TJ is biking down, you really get a snapshot of how different images of the Bay Area kind of coalesce into this this image of what I'd call like visual diversity. There's so much cinematographic potential that's in the Bay Area. And I think now you're seeing a lot more films that are being shot here, like Always Be My Maybe or Woke, the new Matrix episode. And there's just a lot of potential here. And I feel like visually there's a lot to show when it comes to the Bay Area. And music too, I was trying really hard to hone in on music of the Bay Area and the sound of the Bay Area. Although in this film, we don't use too much Bay Area music. A lot of the music that we play in the soundtrack is like music that I've heard walking down the street or playing in other people's cars or, at a house party or something like that. And so, yeah, the cinema, the potential that this area has, and not just my film, but other films that have been shot here, I feel speak to what's available and what could be done with some of the imagery that is just, outside my window. There's even a shot where, TJ is biking down a road where Tupac's, I think Brenda's Got a Baby was shot. And, that's where there's a lot of history that goes into what the Bay Area has become. There's scenes where we're going near the lake and, that's where Poetic Justice was filmed. Mm-hmm. So to me, I feel like being a filmmaker in the Bay Area and showing images of the Bay Area, I'm paying homage to the artists and the creatives who came before me. And in that sense, I feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants and just creating this really small story that I feel is a small reflection and depiction of my life.
That's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Next question is for you, G. As we mentioned before, your film was based on a poem that you wrote in college. What were the struggles like and the challenges in the process like for you translating from a kind of a literary format and perspective onto something that's more visual?
Transition from literary to visual. I think it's a lot easier than you think, because I think one thing they always tell you, like to aspiring filmmakers, is show, don't tell, learn how to cut out dialogue. And I think one thing that a lot of early poetry, romanticism does is build imagery. And I think it's just building tones. I think we watch stuff every day now, especially in quarantine, that just we know the feelings that things give us now. And as filmmakers, if you can get ahead of that, I think that's such a powerful tool. And if anything, I think it really opened my eyes on how to do exposition and how to create resolution, especially with endings with just one shot. It's a very, very eye-opening thing.
Great, thank you so much, definitely. So Mark, next question is for you. Watching Lights Out Chinatown, I definitely got a heavy sense of both melancholy and hope coming out of this film. Where did those feelings come from, and how were you able to balance those kind of dueling ideas?
Right. I'm very privileged to grow up here in California in America, contrasted by like my entire family's escape from Vietnam during the war. They all escaped by boat. Like I'm sure everyone here has heard the story of like the Vietnamese boat people and the refugees and the millions of people that like came by boat and or got lost by sea. So like part of me came from a perspective of understanding like that and like my family having to start a new life here. And so like that really like helped add to just like the disposition that these characters are in. So yeah, I think the melancholy does come from like feeling like a second class citizen at times, and like just me growing up with that and seeing how my family, my parents grew up, and like coming here, like I know that like relatives, for example, that never left the country, they think of like we're all like wealthy and like streets are paved with gold, and like there's this idea of what America is like from an outsider perspective that isn't always true. And that isn't to say that like America isn't like this great place where dreams come true or anything, but it is like definitely has the rose-colored tint is a little bit off. And so going through that and experiencing that, it's especially for someone like the main character, Fook, who came with the hopes of being an architect and like making his family proud. Like this is also why he's lying to his mom about how successful he is when he's never built a bridge here. And he's, the third person that gets called to draw a sketch. And so like there's that dichotomy there.
Thank you for that perspective on the film, Mark. I didn't, going into this, I didn't know that you had like that kind of personal history behind these feelings. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So Leah, next question is for you with Mortician of Manila. This is kind of a two-parter, but in the film you show the contrast between what the family's feeling and how Orly views what's going on with the war on drugs. Do you think that on one hand, for the first part of the question, do you think that Orly's position that this is actually a good thing is entirely motivated by his ideals, or is it partially motivated by the fact that he's actually kind of profiting from everything that's going on? And the second question is like, does showing this, like, does the journalism aspect, is it actually going to have an effect on what's going on there?
I mean, to answer the last question first, journalism to me is a little bit like art in the sense that art can't change the world, nor can journalism, but it can give you a perspective on how you see things and how you perceive and how you feel. So that in and of itself is quite powerful. But, a piece of work, Picasso's Guernica didn't stop that war. Nor will this film stop any of the extrajudicial killings that are going on. It'll take a much stronger force, and it'll take the rule of law, and it'll take democracy, and it'll take everything else to actually reverse this. So no, I mean that's kind of where I stand in terms of making a difference or a change with anything that I do. When it comes to Orly and how he is able to quite merrily and fairly happily and easily balance contradictory feelings, ideologies, beliefs, and everything else, that's also quite a Filipino thing. I might find it in other Asian cultures and other East Asian cultures, but I'm not from there, so I don't know and I can't speak for them. But I do know that as a Filipino, it's totally 100% possible to be a raving homophobe yet have a gay brother. I know that you're totally able to hold two incredibly contradictory points of view and still be able to rationalize that within your life. Totally happily and been very, very merrily. So as a Filipino who is, who clearly shows quite a lot of empathy and quite a lot of, sort of compassion for the people he deals with, he can be a bit of a hard nut when it comes to the politics around it. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a difficult thing for Orly, but I do think it is much more telling about the identity of Filipino-ness than anything else.
Thank you for that perspective. That totally added something to what I understand from the film, both as a journalist and a Filipino, that I relate to a lot of what you just said. So thank you for adding that layer to your experience with Orly.
You're welcome.
Turning it back to you, Dorothy.
Thank you. So Tab, we'll end with you because Jeff had a lightning round question and we're going to do you a favor and let you ask it. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead, man.
Oh, sweet. Okay, well, I mean, if people don't know, Tab's written some epic stuff like Tarzan and Atlantis. So, like, I mean, these are some of my favorite movies of all time. So, like, I have to take advantage of this moment. But for me, as someone that's like, I've been a filmmaker more than half my life. I'm 34, and I've been doing this for a long time. I've written a lot of stuff, directed a lot of stuff. And one thing I know that has helped me along the way is being able to learn from people who have the experience before me, who have done some awesome things and who have experience that I don't have yet, and that have, met people and have done all. So I think for all of us, this is really helpful to hear from you, as we're all making genre films. We're making things that are a little off the beaten path. And I think something you do very well is writing characters that are everlasting, that will last for a very long time, that people still watch those films. So like, do you have any type of advice or any tips or something that has proven successful to you that we could, in a way, adapt to our own writing and our own films that help our films be more everlasting and work well for a longer period of time?
Well, that's a question that I could go on for about 2 hours answering, because it's many layered. You know, I started, like, I came from a small town. I didn't have, I came to Hollywood at 19. I got on a plane. I didn't know a soul here. And all I knew is that I had to be close to where they make movies, because I felt like that's what I wanted to do someday. I wanted to be a director. But ultimately, what I discovered in film school uh, is that I really had a passion for writing, and story is everything, man. Story is everything. And that is, that's just how I've approached my career and my life, actually, in so many ways. I would look, I mean, we have a limited amount of time, so I can't, like, get into the nuts and bolts of screenwriting, except to say that, I was very fortunate to fall into writing those movies for Disney. I did 4 in a row, and that was 12 years of a master class in screenwriting for me, because the way Disney approached developing their stories and their characters, it was always about digging deeper. I recently went up to my parents live up in Olympia, Washington. I have a storage shed there, and I unearthed some old old outlines and things from some of the movies I wrote, Hunchback and Atlantis, as you mentioned. But I looked at, because they would always put on the cover sheet where in the scheme of the development this particular outline was, and I just marveled at the fact that that I was holding something that was considered outline number 12, right? And and that was before they even sent me to treatment. So they just taught me to dig deep, man, to, like, to peel the layers off the onion, and to not just write on the surface of the onion and call it good, but to really peel them off and dig deep. Where's the character, where's the theme, where's the everything? I mean, so I was very fortunate to be able to be in that master class of screenwriting for 12 years, and it taught me a lot. And I've used a lot of those lessons, later in, beyond into the later years of my career. But there's no magic formula. A lot of it is just trial and error, my friend. A lot of it is experience. A lot of it is watching great movies. A lot of it is reading great scripts, and seeing and not and stealing, craft, because it is a craft. I mean, a large part of it is a craft. So steal, and I'm not saying plagiarize. I'm just saying, if you see a device that could work well in your story, use it, man, because I mean, it's out there, and there's a lot of resources at your fingertips without having to pay big money to go to a story conference or screenwriters seminar over a weekend and shit like that, where you just, pardon me, probably aren't going to come away with much anyway. So yeah, I mean, I know that's kind of a bit of a surface answer to a much deeper question, but that's probably what I would advise.
Thank you so much, Tab. I mean, this conversation could go on forever, and I really think this is such a great group. Unfortunately, we wanted to ask a lot more questions, but I think we're going to have to end soon. So let's just finish off with, like, what is everyone working on next? What's your next project, and that we can look forward to seeing? So why don't we start with you, Mark?
As soon as COVID happened, I told myself that I now don't have an excuse to continue writing, and so I set out to write 3 scripts. One of them is under review and under rewrites with a production company out in Vietnam, and another one is I'm being contracted to write a monster movie. I've never done it.
Oh,
so
Awesome.
I'm gonna have fun with that.
This is exciting. Congrats. And we look forward to seeing those projects
you.
come to fruition and hopefully in our festival.
Yeah.
How about you, Nathan? What are you working on next?
Yeah, I have 2 scripts in the pipeline, sort of like 80% finished. One of them, there's one that I really want to hone in on, and I'm kind of almost going backwards in time because the last film I did was kind of a college piece, and the next film, which is also sort of a coming of age story, is based on my high school experiences. So there's that, as well as a few other projects with some other friends of mine who have been working in, just amplifying underrepresented voices. So yeah, I got at least 2 or 3 projects in the pipeline. Hopefully I'll be able to come back again and visit you all.
Great. All based in the Bay Area, I suppose.
Well, one of them is, but the other one's actually based in Texas.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So influences of your life.
Yeah. And I just want to say before I hop off, thank you, Matt and Dorothy for facilitating this, and to everyone at VCU Media.
Oh, thank you for being
It's
here.
been a
We're
pleasure.
So happy. Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. And what about you, Leah? What are you working on next?
So at the moment, I'm working on a fairly long project that I kind of devised some years ago, where I take climate change data and I turn it into a 4-part symphony. And so we tell the story of the past sort of 12,000 years of mankind's impact on the planet using data, which has been turned into sound, and then also siphon archive from archive.org and from viewers and from people who are actually involved in watching the film. They send us their own personal archive and we mix that live for that show. So we're kind of taking that or trying to be taking that around the world. So we've done it a couple of times already for the Serpentine Gallery in London, the Barbican festival called Electric Dreams. We're trying to get it to Vision Durel. If you can think of any North American places to drag something like this, then hit me up on the email, because that's kind of what we do these days. We sonify data and tell stories out of it.
Very cool. That's very cool. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Thank you, Leah. And how about you, Tab? What are you working on next?
I wrote a remake of an old kind of cult ghost story movie called The Changeling. So we're out to actors, and we're going to shoot it. We were supposed to be in production right now, but obviously the world had different ideas. So we're going to shoot it next spring in Ireland. And it's going to be really scary.
No puppets this time, though, right?
Really scary. Oh, it's going to be great. I'm excited. No, It's weird because I grew up loving horror movies. In my entire career, never written one. So I got to uncork all that pent up, scary, bloody, cool stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'm excited for you. Thanks, Tab. How about you, Jeff? What are you working on next?
2 things. So I'm trying to find funding for the last feature script I wrote. It's kind of like Monty Python, but modern day. And so I've been trying to pitch it, running into a lot of walls. So like, as you run into walls, trying to find funding, I'm trying to then take matters into my own hands and make another film. So I'm trying to figure out how to build a fantastical forest somewhere. And so, because the whole film takes place there. And so that will be my second feature, whichever one I can get made first. If I can find an investor for my medieval comedy, then I'll do that. And if not, then if I can find some type of studio space or someplace where I can build a set for a whole film, I'll be doing that. And that one's called The Witch in the Box. So very much like this film, now that I think about it, where the entire film takes place in the perspective of a witch who lives inside a box in a forest, and everyone keeps coming to her for answers and chaos ensues.
Cool. Yeah, looking forward to seeing that.
Thanks.
And last but not least, G, what are you working on next?
My next thing, I got my first producing gig for an ultra low budget. So finally getting to work with some money. So that's exciting. It's an adaptation of a book called God Son of Dracula. So some more horror stuff going on. And just using that money to make my first feature. I think I was able to raise 15,000 for gold, and I think the feedback I've gotten is just raise another 10,000 and just make a feature. And I think it's just finding out which script I have in the doc that's worth that.
Yeah. Good luck with that. You're gonna shoot a feature for 25,000 only.
I feel like that's
I admire you. That's great.
Gotta get more gorilla, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Or I write a vampire movie more. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
There's a very strong horror thread with a lot of our filmmakers.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody so much for joining. To everyone, please don't forget you can still watch all the films in Juke in the Box during our festival until October 31st. If you haven't watched it yet, please go watch it. Tell a friend. These films are fantastic and amazing. And with this new perspective, I think maybe you'll get an even better enjoyment out of them.
And if you enjoyed this conversation in the festival lineup, please consider donating to Visual Communications. Our organization is turning 50 this year, and your support will help sustain our year-round operations and programming, including continuing this festival. And we would really appreciate any help that we can get. So please visit vcmedia.org/donate for more info. And we really hope to see you at another conversation. For the most recent updates on the festival, please visit festival.vcmedia.org or follow us on our social media accounts at VC Film Festival. Don't forget to tag us LAAPFF 2020. And if you want to promote your films or to even check us out, there will be so many things that you can see under that hashtag. And thanks for joining us.